the beginning it was a mess, but when we managed to get this away, to clean out the samples, we got really pure DNA to manage to tell something about him and especially about his ancestry.
It is possible that the ancient astronauts taught the Egyptians that mummification was a way of preserving their genetic information in the DNA.
For a century, King Tutankhamun's gold mask defined an immortal, flawless legacy. But when scientists performed a modern autopsy, they uncovered a truth hidden beneath the gold. Severe deformities, a twisted, crippled foot, and the secret of 130 worn canes. The image of Egypt's boy god was a meticulously crafted LI. What did the DNA of the world's most famous mummy reveal? And how could a royal obsession with bloodline perfection doom an entire dynasty? The answers defy everything we thought we knew. Inside the Valley of the Kings, a mobile CT scanner hummed to life as Egypt's most famous mummy slid into its core. The digital autopsy began with Tutankhamun's skeleton, layer by layer, pixel by pixel. What the radiologists found was not the body of a golden warrior, but a teenager crippled by his own bones. The left foot, twisted inward at nearly a right angle, told the first story. The bones of the second and third metatarsals were pitted and dead. Avascular necrosis, a condition where the blood supply fails and bone tissue slowly dies. In modern clinics, this means pain that never really leaves, the kind that flares with every step. The arch of the foot had collapsed, the toes curled and shortened. The joint surfaces were rough, misshapen, and inflamed. The clinical picture was clear. Tutankhamun suffered from a severe clubfoot, equinovarus, that would have made walking a daily ordeal. No amount of royal privilege could spare him the grinding ache or the instability. The scan's 1,700 cross-sectional images mapped not just the deformity, but the limitations of a life lived in pain. Archaeologists turned next to the tomb's inventory, an astonishing cache of 130 walking canes, stacked in corners and bundled beside the burial chamber. Some were ceremonial, carved with gold and ivory, but many were plain, their ebony tips polished smooth from use. The wood at the base was worn unevenly, the kind of wear that comes only from constant pressure against stone floors. Analysis of these canes revealed fingerprints of daily struggle, cracks from repeated stress, repairs made by palace craftsmen, grips shaped by a young hand that leaned too heavily, too often. The evidence in the tomb matched the evidence in the bones. This was not the collection of a healthy king who chose staffs as symbols of rule. This was the toolkit of a frail adolescent who could not cross a room without support. Scenes painted on the tomb walls show Tutankhamun as a chariot hunter and master of the bow, but the CT scan strips away the myth. The boy who wore the golden mask could not have stood unaided for the rituals that defined his kingship. Each cane is a silent witness to his private war against pain. In the end, the pristine golden mask was only a shell. The body beneath it belonged to a teenager forced to rule from a throne he could barely rise from, a boy whose every step was shadowed by disease. The science leaves no doubt. Tutankhamun's reign was carried out on legs that failed him, and the truth of his suffering was buried beneath layers of linen, resin, and royal propaganda. For decades, the story of Tutankhamun's death was shaped by a single image, a heroic accident, a young king thrown from his chariot, his chest crushed in battle or sport. That idea clung to museum placards and popular imagination, but the evidence tells a different story. When radiologists examined the CT scans, the digital autopsy stripped away the legend and revealed a hard, clinical truth. The entire front of Tutankhamun's chest was missing. Ribs ended in sharp stumps, the sternum gone. At first glance, this looked like the aftermath of a violent crash. Closer inspection showed something else. Clean tool marks slicing through bone, and pools of hardened resin where the chest should have been. Those are not the scars of trauma in life, they are signs of intervention after death. In 1925, Howard Carter's team faced a mummy glued to its coffin by centuries of resin and heat. To extract the body, they used heated knives and solvents, cutting away ribs and limbs. The damage once blamed on a chariot accident is, in fact, the product of modern hands. The chest wall was deliberately removed. likely during embalming or during the frantic extraction. Tool marks on bone and resin filling the cavities point to post-mortem interference. The heart, traditionally left intact for the afterlife, was missing, perhaps removed during this process, or lost in the chaos of extraction. Forensic radiologists poring over the scanned data found no evidence of healing or bruising that would suggest the chest injuries happened while Tutankhamun was alive. Instead, the pattern matches what happens when embalmers or archaeologists forcibly remove bone and tissue after death. Even the famous leg fracture, once offered as proof of a dramatic fall, shows signs of resin seepage into the break, indicating it happened around the time of death or during embalming, not necessarily in a chariot crash. The myth of a warrior king dying in action dissolves under modern science. The body was not shattered by a chariot, but by the hands of those who tried to preserve it and later to study it. The chest wounds record ancient ritual and modern haste, not battlefield glory. The CT images strip away the legend, leaving the reality of a fragile body, further harmed by those tasked with keeping it intact. With the heroic narrative dismantled, the question remains, if not a chariot crash, then what brought down the boy who wore the golden mask? The answer lies deeper, within the blood and bones that science can now read. Inside a climate-controlled laboratory, the challenge was nothing less than extracting genetic secrets from a body over 3,000 years old. Ancient DNA is fragile, fragmented by time, humidity, and the harsh chemicals of mummification. Each sample, usually a sliver of bone, was handled with gloves, masks, and sterilized tools. The risk of contamination from modern DNA haunted every step. To guard against error, the team used blank controls in every batch. If any negative control showed a trace of DNA, the entire run was discarded and started again. The process relied on a method called polymerase chain reaction, PCR, which amplifies tiny fragments of DNA so they can be studied. But ancient DNA is so degraded that a single test is never enough. For each genetic marker, the team ran up to 30 separate PCR reactions, looking for consistency. Only when the same result appeared again and again across different extracts and different days did it count as real. To strengthen the findings, every test was repeated in a second, physically separate lab. Different staff, different equipment, same bone powder. The teams worked blind to each other's results, seeking to rule out any accidental bias or cross-contamination. Even the Y chromosome profiles of the lab staff were checked and compared to the mummies. No overlap meant no accidental fingerprinting from modern handlers. Replication added weight to the claims. The DNA fragments themselves were short, sometimes just 100 base pairs long, a fraction of what modern forensics prefers. The team focused on short tandem repeats, called STR, which are reliable even in damaged samples. They also targeted specific genes of the malaria parasite, searching for traces of ancient infection. Every positive result was checked against the negative controls and the profiles of unrelated mummies to confirm it was unique to Tutankhamun's family and not a background signal. Short fragments required careful interpretation. Skeptics pointed out that Egypt's heat and the history of repeated handling could make genuine results almost impossible, yet the protocols were designed to answer those doubts. Multiple biopsies from each mummy, repeated extractions, and independent lab replication set a new standard for ancient DNA research at the time. The team published only the alleles that showed up in at least 2 independent extracts and in both labs. Protocols mattered. For every batch, the scientists recorded which bone was sampled, how it was processed, and which technicians handled it. Each tube was logged and tracked. The data sets, while not as comprehensive as modern genome sequencing, were robust enough to map genetic relationships and identify pathogens. The result was a genetic profile that could be trusted, not just a lucky find, but the product of rigorous, methodical science. With these safeguards in place, the team prepared to reconstruct a family tree from the faint chemical echoes left in ancient bones. Trusted evidence made the reconstruction possible. Tutankhamun's DNA profile locked into place, marker by marker, against the genetic signatures of 2 other mummies, the enigmatic male from KV-55 and the younger lady from KV-35. When scientists compared his short tandem repeats, the repeating stretches of DNA used for forensic kinship, they found a disturbing symmetry. His father and mother each matched him on every critical locus. The real shock came when the profiles of KV-55 and KV-35YL were overlaid. Of 16 key alleles, 11 were shared. This is not the pattern of distant cousins or even half-siblings. It is the fingerprint of a full brother and sister. The pedigree chart, once a branching tree, twisted back on itself. Amenhotep III and Queen Tiye stood at the root, but instead of their children marrying outward, their son and daughter, KV55 and the younger lady, had a child together, Tutankhamun. The royal bloodline, obsessed with purity, had closed into a genetic loop. Each new connection on the chart tightened the knot until the family tree looked more like a noose. The numbers are as stark as the relationships they describe. Short tandem repeat analysis showed that both KV55 and KV35YL matched Tutankhamun at every paternal and maternal marker. 11 out of 16 alleles overlapped between the two, a match rate expected only in full siblings. Genetic modeling and probability calculations, run through software designed for forensic pedigree analysis, favored the brother-sister scenario over all other close-kin possibilities. The odds against such a match arising from anything less than a first-degree relationship were overwhelming. Yet, even as the results circulated among Egyptologists and geneticists, not everyone was convinced. In a quiet office, far from the glare of press conferences, a critical analyst pored over the raw data. She pointed out the limits of ancient DNA, the heat of the Egyptian tombs, the centuries of handling, and the ever-present risk of contamination. Short tandem repeat markers can drop out when DNA is badly degraded. In a family already riddled with cousin marriages, high allele sharing could sometimes mimic the signature of full siblings. Alternative models, half-siblings or double cousins, could not be ruled out entirely with the available data. The analyst cautioned that the evidence for full sibling parents is strong, but not absolute. The dynasty's inbreeding was so intense that even modern tools can struggle to untangle it. Still, the mainstream interpretation held. The DNA painted a portrait of a royal house so determined to keep its bloodline pure that it turned inward, generation after generation. The result was a boy king whose very genome bore the scars of this closed circle, a genetic bottleneck that would soon exact a terrible price. The next step was to look at what this incestuous union had done to Tutankhamun's body, and why the cost of royal purity was paid in pain and deformity. Tutankhamun's DNA carried a burden that no amount of royal gold could hide. In the world of genetics, when close relatives have children, their offspring play a dangerous lottery. Harmful recessive genes, usually masked by healthy copies, suddenly have nowhere to hide. In Tutankhamun's case, both his parents were the children of Amenhotep III and Queen Tiye, full siblings, not just distant cousins. The result was a double dose of genetic risk written into every cell of the boy king's body. The evidence is clearest in the places where his body broke down. CT scans reveal a palate that never fully closed, a cleft palate, a classic sign of recessive gene expression. His spine curves unnaturally, a mild scoliosis that would have made standing straight difficult. The clubfoot, so obvious in the scans and so debilitating in life, is another signature of hidden defects brought to the surface by inbreeding. These are not random misfortunes. They are the predictable outcome when a family tree folds in on itself, generation after generation. The biology is simple but unforgiving. Each time siblings or close kin marry, the odds rise that two copies of the same faulty gene will meet. In a single generation, the risk might seem small, but with repeated cycles, the errors pile up. The royal obsession with pure blood did not preserve their strength, it concentrated their weaknesses. Tutankhamun's body became a map of this genetic collapse, his frailty, the cost of a dynasty's desire to remain untainted by outsiders. By the time he was crowned, the damage was already done, and every step he took was shadowed by the invisible legacy of his own DNA. A single mosquito carrying Plasmodium falciparum could do what centuries of palace intrigue and foreign enemies could not. DNA extracted from Tutankhamun's bones revealed the genetic markers of this deadly parasite, MAD20 and RO33 alleles, proof that he suffered not just one, but repeated bouts of malaria. In most healthy adults, the fever and chills would pass. But Tutankhamun's body, already weakened by congenital disease, could not withstand the assault. Each infection left him more exhausted, his immune system less able to recover. The science shows a cascade, malaria, bone disease, and a fractured leg, all piling on a frail frame. The dynasty's fate, however, was sealed not only in Tutankhamun's blood, but in the tiny coffins buried beside him. Archaeologists found 2 mummified fetuses, each just 5 to 9 months along. Their bones, fragile and incomplete, bore the signs of congenital defects, evidence of the same genetic pitfalls that haunted their father. DNA testing, though limited by the poor preservation of ancient tissue, pointed to Tutankhamun as their probable father. Yet neither child drew breath. The royal nursery remained silent. Tutankhamun died at 19 with no living heirs. His daughters, lost before birth, were the last biological hope of a house that had turned too far inward. The golden mask promised eternity, but the truth lay with a parasite and a broken family tree. The 18th dynasty, once the mightiest in Egypt, ended not with a war or a coup, but with a mosquito's bite and the silent tragedy of 2 unmarked graves. Modern DNA has stripped away ancient myth, exposing the cost of power pursued at any price. Today, genetic disease still haunts families where bloodlines are treated as sacred. Science keeps reminding us nature does not honor royal ambition, it honors only biology. Every time we idolize perfection, we risk missing the real, fragile humanity beneath the mask. What does the gold mask hide in our world today? Let me know what you think below.